Avalara proudly sponsors this podcast series about accountants by accountants and featuring some of the best thought leaders in the industry. Thank you to our sponsor, Avalara. Avalara's award-winning tax automation solutions help accounting practitioners and businesses of all sizes simplify sales tax compliance with real-time rates, automated returns filing, and more. Learn more at avalara.com. Hey everyone, this is Lorilyn, and you're listening to the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly Accounting Podcast. More accountants than ever are experimenting and shaping our profession in new and in interesting ways. On this show, I sit down with these rock stars to discuss the ideas, the opportunities, the struggles, and the strategies that they're taking advantage of so the rest of us can do the same. Accountants can earn free CPE credit from listening to this podcast. Just download the Earmark CPE app in the App Store or visit earmarkcpe.com. 2.6 out of 5 stars. Accountants rank in the bottom 6% of careers for happiness. Why is this and what can we do about it? In today's episode, I'm speaking with Donny Shimamoto to get his perspective on how employers, employees, and the industry at large can work to change this. So I got sent over Donny's bio, and let me just tell you, it reads like a Lifetime Achievement Award. It is incredibly impressive. But Donny is the founder and managing director of Enterprise Technologies LLC, an advisory-focused CPA firm focused on innovation, acceleration, and organizational development for small businesses, middle market organizations, and not-profits. In addition to being an industry thought leader, he's been awarded, and it sounds like most deservedly, a ton of different accolades. And so we're really excited to have him here. He's been in the industry for a couple decades now and get his perspective on the careers for accountants and why we are so unhappy. So thank you so much, Donny, for being here with us.
You're welcome. And thank you for having me and all the nice words you said about me.
This is actually just going to be a huge hype episode for you. We're just going to be spend it all talking about how awesome Donny is. So Donny, tell us kind of in your own words where you started and how you got to where you are.
Sure. So if we go really where I started, so I first got exposed
all the way back to the beginning.
I first got exposed to accounting in high school. I think it was my sophomore year. Took the first accounting course. Found it super easy. Was just natural. So you might say I'm kind of a natural accountant. Funny enough, we actually had a new teacher. So she had just finished earning her degree to teach. It was her first job. We were going through the accounting, and then she would look at me and go, "Is that answer correct?" That was like, yeah, it was funny. So it's kind of, but started back then. Also started in technology at the year afterwards. Technology actually started way earlier because I've been programming since about 7 or 8. But that went over into college, where I actually did a dual bachelor's degree in accounting and management information systems under the guidance of a controller that I was working for just before my senior year in high school. He was like, "You got to go down this path because technology is the key." This is in the early 90s. So he's like, "Technology is going to be the key. You're going to want to do these two together because that's really where the power is." So I did that in college, ended up interning at Coopers & Lybrand, which gives you a feel for my age. Eventually into PricewaterhouseCoopers, but I did both financial and IT audit. And then I went into the consulting side, and that's where I've been for the last 20 years, is really working on the consulting side.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, yeah. Okay. So I don't know if you guys are watching the video of this, but this man does not look a day over like 39. So when you said early 90s, I'm like, in my head, I was like, so when I was in early elementary school. But that's really cool though, to hear that you've seen kind of both sides of the industry, both the Big Four side and then, your own consulting side and whatnot. Because I think that perspective is really important to this conversation, because there is such a difference of culture, but then there's a lot of overlap as well. So the fact that you can kind of speak to both sides of it, I think is really important. I think that viewpoint to bring in is very important as well.
I definitely agree with you there. I think even though I was with a Big Four, because I was with a small office, and eventually PwC actually closed its Hawaii office. So that's how
Uh-huh.
small we were when they became PwC. They were like, you guys are not even big enough. And we were like an 80-person office. So it's not like we were really small. They're like, you're not big enough. We don't want you. So they split the office off. But I think that's kind of the change we've seen in the industry as a whole now. Because even in talking with even the mid-sized firms or even some of the mid-sized firms now, I'm asking them about who are you hiring from? Are you hiring from these large big four people? And they say, actually, I've been hearing a lot of them say, actually, no, we don't really like them because they're not getting enough exposure, and they're stuck kind of doing this
Mm.
one thing, and
Mhm.
they're so narrow, and they only know this one way to do things, compared to people that come from what's more like what I came from, which is like a mid-size or a larger, the lower end of the larger firms, like where we get exposed to a
Mhm.
lot more, we touch a lot of different things. So I think
Mhm.
that's actually really important to raise, is that because tied back to what we're talking about, a lot of the complaints and things that we hear, I think, are from people working in very large firms. And of course,
Yeah.
it's like pain, right? People in pain are the ones that are going to complain and be the most vocal. And we don't see enough of those of us that love what we do, that are really engaged in the profession, in working with our clients, and really just love the profession.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's hard because, I kind of come from a little different background in that I didn't take my first accounting course till 5 years after I'd graduated from undergrad when I decided I was going to go back to school and become a CPA. But I know anyone who is in undergrad accounting, who are they being exposed to? They're being exposed to the Big Four because that's who has money to go on all these college campuses and, wine and dine these very naive 21 and 22-year-olds, But I mean, I kind of view that though as a little bit of a blessing because I know who I am. Like I am a people pleaser. I want to climb the ranks. I want to work for the best. And I know if I would have majored in counting, like that would have been my path. I would have been straight into the Big Four. But since I did it later, like by the time I was already married when I went back to school. A month of going back to school, I was found out I was pregnant with my first child. So by the time I finished all my accounting courses, working for the Big Four wasn't an option. I'm like, I have a 1-year-old. I can't go work 80 hours a week. So I was kind of forced into working for a more small local firm, which I can talk about that a little later. That ended up being super toxic, but I'm kind of happy that I skipped that whole big big four route because it's a little bit of a churn and burn environment. I think the average lifetime, or not the average lifetime, but the average like work cycle of someone, they're out within 2 years,
Hmm. Hmm.
you know. So, all right. So in your experience, cuz you have, you've seen it all, why do you think right now accountants are unhappy?
I really think it is just being overwhelmed with everything. And I always start to come back. Well, actually, let's talk about the everything. So to me, the everything, all the changes in tax law, right? Going through the pandemic with all the PPP craziness, which affected tax
Mhm.
people, affected client accounting, even affected audit, and looking at everything, right? Everyone was really affected just a lot. And it's just been compounding and compounding. That's what I hear year after year. We talk about the people crisis right now, but there's been a people crisis since, I think I hear other people say, well, we've been in a people crisis since the 90s. And so that, I think that's just always true. The big thing for me, especially me having the dual technology training, is coming back and looking at it and say, well, there's been technology that's been around for so long, and the pandemic actually forced people to adopt it. Like you look at things like
Yeah.
instant messaging, which is essentially the chat on the computer. Like when I started my firm in 2001, we used AOL Instant Messenger at that time
Yes,
to
AIM.
communicate. Yeah, but we used it in our firm, so we had adopted it 20 years
Oh,
ago,
wow.
right?
That's
And
incredible.
think about when Skype came out, because we also used to use Skype,
Uh-huh.
not Skype for business, but Skype. We used to use that to hold our meetings because we were this small firm and we couldn't afford video conferencing, but we wanted to be able to have, these real-time meetings with staff that we were working with. And so
Mhm.
it's really like these technologies have been around forever, and only now is the profession kind of catching up and starting to utilize that. And it's true not just in this meeting and this hybrid work context, but it's also within workflow, within data analytics, like all of this stuff. A lot of what people are putting forward now, like what is now this data analytics movement, is what the business intelligence movement was, that actually started in the
Mm.
90s. So these are
Yeah.
not like new earth-shattering, breaking technologies. These are things that have been around. It's just that it's coming around again, and it's time for people to adopt it because that's what can actually help make accounting better. It'll get rid of all that grunt work and let us focus on why I think a lot of us became accountants, which is to
Mm-hmm.
work on more the analysis, the strategy, the problem solving, and to really help people and businesses be more successful.
Avalara helps businesses of all sizes get indirect tax compliance right. Their sales tax solutions help you manage sales and use tax complexities while lessening risk for your business and clients. Whether you're a small business or a global enterprise, Avalara can help you deliver tax compliance services confidently and efficiently. Over 30,000 organizations across the globe use Avalara's cloud-based compliance solutions to solve transaction tax compliance needs, including sales and use, VAT, and other direct and indirect taxes. Yeah. Now, do you think part of the reason, and this, I have my own theory about this, but I want to hear yours. Why has our industry been so slow to adopt those technologies that have been around for 20 years?
Well, I think a lot of people like to say that part of it is because accountants are so conservative. And,
Mm-hmm.
I look at it and I go, okay, yeah, in general. And in a lot of ways, of course, that's a good thing because we don't want accountants that are all at the bleeding edge and bringing all this risk in. Because that's also the side, like if you look at audit, the thing that audit does is it looks at risk, whether risk is
Yeah.
reasonable or not, right? And can I mitigate that risk? So just by nature, we are more conservative as a profession. But the other thing that I think is really changing, or perhaps one of the barriers, as you asked, is historically the way the work has been done has been led by the partners who tend to be older, who tend to be more change averse. And it's also tied into their income, which if I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
spend money on this technology instead, it's coming out of my pocket. That's the downside of working for a smaller or even a mid-sized firm where if the firm owner
Mm-hmm.
is really just looking at it as their money and what are they spending their money on, right, that could be a downside. And so there's I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of different reasons why we may not have seen that occur. But again, kind of we're at this point now where there's this big shift, and the fact that we need and we're starting to embrace other disciplines within accounting to
Mm-hmm.
utilize an IT person, to utilize, a scientist for ESG reporting. Like all of these other disciplines are starting to be brought into the firms, into the way that we do accounting. And that is,
Mm-hmm.
I think, going to open up a lot more doors.
Yeah. Yeah. And the one point you touched on that I'm like, I would die on this hill is I think that it's the income, it's like it's affecting their income and they're not seeing it as an investment. Dumb accounting coach, they're seeing it as an expense, but I mean, here's the thing, their model has worked. It's worked for years and they've made good money, so why would they change?
Mhm.
If it's only going to affect their bottom line 5%, 6%, like they're like, it's too much, and so I think that's has been part of the issue in my opinion. Is it's just like, well, why would I change this? I'm making good money,
Yeah,
and I can still
yeah,
get people to do this work. But then now the problem is you can't get people to do the work.
exactly,
And so it's
exactly,
like I feel like they've been kicking this can down the road and then like, obviously COVID's been horrible, but I think that's like just the one good thing that's come out from it is it's
Mhm.
really forced these firms, and then I would call, dinosaur firms or a lot of times toxic firms, to adapt way more quickly than they would have, or if they probably would have never adapted. They probably would have done it until these partners retired and then, sold their firm for pennies on the dollars because who wants to come in and buy a firm where you have to completely redo all the systems and processes and retrain everyone. So, yeah,
Exactly,
no, I'm totally in alignment with you on that.
exactly.
Do you think like kind of building on that, like do you think there's a culture in the industry as a whole, outside of people saying, "Oh, we're more conservative," like, do you think it is more just like people, it's money? Like, do you think there's anything else going at play or happening here that's causing this?
Yeah, because I won't put everything on the people per se.
Mhm.
When I look at the vendors, even like a lot of what I do today is I help firms or regular businesses figure out their tech stacks and what's going to work together and what doesn't work together. And the challenge even I see, even for my own firm, is there isn't something that all works together really nicely. There
Mhm.
isn't a cohesive solution. Everyone kind of does this little thing, and with the start of the move to the cloud, we kept hearing best of breed, best of breed, best of breed, right? So do all these
Uh-huh.
things, but now I've got 50 million passwords that I have to manage, and I have to figure out which system do I go in to do this or that, and depends on which client I'm working with, right? Then I like it's just created all of this additional complexity that now we're starting to see more consolidation as some of the larger players start to buy up smaller players, right? And integrate the functionality in. So I think it's partly to blame, if we're going to call it that. It's also the software vendors that they're really not looking at the
Mhm.
whole picture. They're really just trying to meet this need or kind of keep up with each other on the table stakes, but no one's really bringing a great holistic solution to bear.
Oh, I know, and I'm so guilty too of building a tech stack and then seeing something new shiny in the corner of my eye and being like, "Oh, I maybe I need to replace that app with this new app," and, which let me tell you, staff do not like it if you are consistently changing over apps.
Oh, I'm very familiar with
That is
that. Like part of our firm is I call it eating our own dog food. So every time I see a
Mhm.
new app, I'm like, and especially since we help others understand the technology, I'm like, we got to try it. And so my staff's like,
Yes.
oh, you found another one? And I'm like, yeah, we're just going to try it with this team and we're going to see. So then that team and now has to learn this new app. But to me, that's also part of testing it. It's like, how easy is it for them to
Yeah.
learn? Can we actually take what we're doing, which we already know is good and works in this other app? And is it a
Mhm.
way, is it easy for us to take that model or that framework and apply it in this app? Does it actually do the same things, or what are the nuances? So that's
Yeah.
where for us it's been very interesting to see the apps kind of side by side to say, well, this app will do this app does the same thing, but it's a little different. You got to think of it this way. So
Yeah.
it becomes kind of this, which then also makes it harder, because then when people look
Yeah.
at it, they go, well, which one do I use? They all kind of look the same. And you really need to understand the nuances of the way one app does
Yeah.
something versus the other. And then what are the implications to the way that your team would work, or how you comply with standards, which is another thing that complicates, I think, some of the technology adoption. There's
Yeah,
just a ton of
honestly,
challenges.
oh, 100%, and what you're speaking on is, change it's kind of like change management, but that, app review management, all that, that could be a whole, episode series in itself. Because I'm sure there's tons of firm owners out there who would love to know, someone give me a process for doing it, because there are. It's hard, and especially, the larger your team is, the harder it's gonna become and the more pushback you'll get, and so
Mhm, mhm.
write that down, someone. Do a podcast series on that. Do you think too, because I mean you're a different generation than I, and so it'd be interesting to get your perspective on this. I'm wondering too if generationally why we I'm a millennial. We're unhappy because what makes us happy is not the same as what made boomers happy. Can you speak at all to that? How you think this kind of change in how millennials and the generation below us, where are they, Gen Z, are thinking about work and work life and balance in general, and how that's kind of driving this as well.
I I actually don't think it's so much that there's a different value. I actually think it's a matter of patience. And so
Mhm.
the boomers, and even I'm part of Gen X,
Mhm.
we're a lot more, I think, willing to wait to go through that
Mm.
process of, okay, I understand I have to pay my dues and earn my way to a certain point. And I think we just don't see that in the millennials. It's part of that learned immediate gratification type of thing, for better or worse. I always laugh too, because I hear the boomers all complain about the millennials, and I'm like, these are all your kids, so you guys are the ones that cause all the
Yeah.
problems. So stop complaining, because you're
Yeah.
part of the problem. You raised your kids
Yeah.
to want what they want, and to have
Yeah.
that, to be able to have this better lifestyle and everything. And so we need to embrace that's per se part of that new normal, or what's happening. But in the end, I think we all kind of want similar things. It's to spend more
Mhm.
times with those that we care about. And I don't think any of us would turn that down if that opportunity occurred. I think all of us want, especially in accounting, to help others be more successful. So whether it's our clients, whether it's our team members, whether it's those that we're hiring, right? And
Mhm.
the difference, I think, again, is kind of just this concept of patience of, well, do I want to keep doing things the same way and wait until I retire? And some of it is, am I as a millennial or even as an X willing to wait until the partner's going to retire and then I can change things to be what I want it to be? I don't know that we
Yeah.
still see that anymore. And I don't know we see the need for that anymore. One of the biggest things I see is more and more younger accountants actually starting their own firms and saying, because now you
Mhm.
can spin up Office 365 or Google Enterprise, and you've got essentially a corporate infrastructure already built out for you that you before there was a monetary barrier to that.
Yeah, the barrier to entries is, non-existent compared to, if you were starting a firm 30 years ago. I think like I'll be the first to admit as a millennial, like we definitely, or at least I do, we bite the hand that feeds us in the sense that it's like, well, yes, we're this way, but you created us this way. And like, and I think part of that is too, like, think of millennials, what we went through. Like, we watched 9/11 happen. We experienced, like, as we were coming out of college, the huge market crash happened. And so it's just like our entire growing up has been like one trauma kind of after another,
Mm.
and then we've seen as well, like, we've seen these and not to make it like capitalism versus socialism thing, but like we're watching these individuals and corporations, their profits skyrocket and then all these workers' wages being, kept low. So it's like the people at the top are being fed and the people at the bottom aren't. And instead of and the wage disparity obviously is a lot different now than it was 40, 50 years ago. So millennials are looking at that and being like, wait a second, that's messed up. And so I think we're a lot more likely than the boomer generation to kind of push back against that inequality and being like, well, what makes you so special to make those wages? Like, I could do what you're doing. I see what you do. I could do that. And then hence, well, I'm just going to go start my own firm. I'm going to go, or I'm going to work for this other firm that more aligns with that.
Right, right.
So,
Well, and that's where too. I think there's a big. I think a lot of millennials are missing a really big point, and they don't see it because
mhm,
they haven't hit it yet. Where the experience, so someone like me at the tail end of Gen X, where I've kind of seen both sides, it really, really worries me. And I mean, you've seen my resume, right? You've
yeah.
said it's pretty impressive, but I still worry that I don't know everything that that generation before us knows, because I still sit down with some
Mm-hmm.
of them and I'm like, oh, I never thought about that, or I didn't think about it
Yeah.
from that perspective. I was working with a client this week, and they talked about, one of the EVPs in their company. He's not stopping them from doing stuff, but he's also not pushing them forward. So they were complaining about him, and I said, well, as long as he's not stopping you, that's not that bad. And I said, well, does he contribute? They said, well, what he does is he contributes this different perspective. He said, well, this is why it was like that. Or this, have you thought about this and that? Because this is why something was done a particular way. And they said, sometimes it's like, oh no, we never thought about it that way. That's interesting. Right. And so I think it's really
Yeah.
about all of the generations learning to value each other more rather than fight against each other or disparage each other, to really just sit and listen. And there's these
Hmm.
grains of insight that we can gain from each other, and then it's a balancing of all of these different things that will help make all of us happier in what we're doing.
I totally agree with that. One of my business partners in another business I have, he's 30 years older than me, and I love it because it's he brings in a totally different perspective, a totally different background, wealth of experience that's just, so invaluable. And we're very complementary in our skill set. So, and it's I wouldn't trade him for the world because I love what he brings to the table because it's just so different from what I could get from anyone, who's a millennial like me.
Mm.
So, yeah. Hey, love not war, everyone. So,
Yes.
did you know that 52% of accounting practitioners, large and small, still rely on spreadsheets and manual processes for sales tax compliance? Why not move your accounting practice to the 21st century using Avalara for Accountants? The Avalara for Accountants automation platform helps accounting service providers of any size grow their service offerings with sales tax prep and filing, transfer pricing, research, business license management, and more. Scale your practice efficiently with award-winning automation that brings efficiency and accuracy to sales tax compliance. Want to learn more? Email accountants@avalara.com or visit avalara.com. All right, so how would you personally rank your happiness now versus the beginning of your career, and what changed? What contributed to that change? Because I'm assuming you're going to say you're happier now than when you first started, but maybe you're not. So,
Um, I don't know if I would say I'm happier. I would say in a lot of ways I'm I was going to say more content, but I don't know if that's actually the
Mhm,
right word either. So, in the beginning of my career, I was very driven. I had very clear goals. It was to be a big four partner at the very beginning,
mm,
right? And then
mhm,
eventually, and then it was to own my own firm, which then I started. That was 20 years ago. So, having accomplished all that kind of things, I bought my first house back then as well.
mhm,
So, like, all of that's kind of gone. And now, if you ask me, am I happy in doing what I do? I love what I do. I love working with my clients. I love the way that we do things. I love pushing the profession forward and being a part of
mhm,
that. I mean, that was one of the big realizations for me around 2009 when I went to the AICPA's Leadership Academy. It opened up my eyes to the broader profession and the fact that we're not
mhm.
just someone working in an accounting firm, we're part of this global profession that really is enacting and making commerce happen across the world. And that's even more true today as we look at globalization and the impact that, like, what's going on in Russia or what happens in China and how that impacts even us in the US, right? So
Yeah.
I really feel even more impassioned. So the reason I hesitate is because then I say, well, we have so much to do. We have this dissatisfaction to deal with. We have technology adoption to drive. We have changes in the way that people are making decisions, like the whole moving forward of this ESG reporting and all the concepts that are associated therein. We have all of this work to do. So when I look at it now, I feel like, man, there's so much more that we're having to deal with. There's so much more
Mhm.
that we need to do compared to back then. I would have been like, well, I just need to finish doing this and then I'll be able to get the promotion I wanted.
Yeah. Yeah, so you have a very much, industry-wide view, like, your happiness, or your I guess what you're driving toward is you're really focused on how can I make the industry better as a whole versus how can I make changes within my firm to make me happier. Am I hearing that right?
Well, actually, I would go beyond that. So, I always actually, if you looked at my LinkedIn profile, it actually says improving the world one accountant at a time. So it's not
Oh,
just
I love
about
that.
improving our industry; it's really about improving the world.
Mhm,
And that was what I tapped into when I looked at, what really gave me satisfaction. What gives me satisfaction in my job is helping that client and get really giving them um, I always tell my staff it's these one of these three things. So first is either we're giving them peace of mind. So whether
mhm,
it's we've implemented the right cybersecurity controls, we've got everything secured, we're not going to have a data breach, we're not going to get hacked. So peace of mind. In the tax side, we don't do tax, but in the tax side, for example, it would be they've received an IRS letter and they're like, don't worry, you're not going to lose your house, right? You're going to be okay. You're going to get through this audit. That's that
yeah,
peace of mind. With the pandemic and PPP, it was, you don't worry, you're going to be able to stay in business. We'll figure out how to get payroll. We'll get you this PPP money, right? That's part of what we do as accountants is work with these small business owners or individuals to say, hey, we can help you achieve your goals. The second thing I feel like we provide is vision and clarity. So it's really around where do you see yourself 3 to 5 years from now? What are those goals? So at an individual level, I have kids, they're in school, I own a house. In the business level, it's my business has done this. We've broken into this market,
mhm,
we've grown in this way, or we've transitioned from this generation to that generation, whatever that vision is. We then help build out that plan and that roadmap that says, well, you have to save this and put this in your 401k, or from a business standpoint, here are the changes that you need to enact to make that happen, right? So being able to
mhm,
provide that vision and clarity, which in the end, to me, both of those feed back into hope. And a lot of times when I say that, people go, accountants provide hope. Like that doesn't sound like that matches. But when you
Mhm.
talk to the clients where you've really had an impact, that's what it was. I think about two of the most meaningful experiences I had. One was when I was an IT auditor. This is
Yeah.
me at 20 something years old, 22 or 23 years old. I was going in to audit the IT department at this big state department, department at one of in our state of Hawaii. And the IT director, probably 40 something year old, maybe even 50-year-old guy, like breaks down crying to me because I'm asking him about, are you getting support from management and all this stuff, and he's like, no, I'm not. I keep asking for funds. I'm trying to get funds for this and blah blah blah. And he just broke down, and I'm 20 something years old sitting going, okay, I've got this grown man crying. What do I say? What do I do? Right? And
Yeah.
I just had to sit there and say, I'm like, I'm so sorry to hear that. Well, the good news for you is that I can write some of this up because I agree with you that some of this is needed. It's actually an internal controls weakness. I can start to do
Yeah.
that. And you see him kind of pull himself together. And he had hope that now he was going to be able to get what he needed to really properly secure down the department and things.
Yeah.
So that was kind of one. The Another one was really a consulting client where the CEO of a nonprofit came to me and she was like, I don't know if we're going to have enough money to get through. And she said, someone
Yeah.
said you could help me. And I said, well, I'm not a financial planner type person. And she explained to me what she needed. She really needed a budgeting and planning system. So I said, "Oh, okay, no, no, no.
Mhm.
This is what we need to do for you to get you visibility into your costs. We are going to apply like management accounting principles to figure out how much it costs for you to deliver services to each foster child." That's what they did.
Yep.
She's literally crying, telling me and explaining to me what's happening. And so
Yeah.
then once I explained the solution to her, she kind of brightened up. She dried her tears, and they were kind of wrapping up. And she stands up and she goes, "Can I just give you a hug?" And I was like,
Oh.
"We're gonna have to, of course." And again, it was that hope, right? I gave her that vision and that clarity around this is what you need, and this is how you're going to be able to continue to operate. And that's that
Mhm.
hope of okay. And she left, and she was happy, and she's actually still a client till today. That was, I think, over 10 years ago.
Wow. Okay, so I'm hearing a theme here in everything you're saying. So, I would ask you then, I think I know what you're gonna say. If we were to take 3 things, salary, meaning, and work environment in how it relates to workplace happiness, which do you think is the most important and why?
I actually think it's all three.
Mhm.
This is where I think people like to latch onto one or another. And it's only when we actually have balance in our life that then we are happy. Because if you don't have
Mhm.
enough money, you're struggling for food, struggling for shelter, right? That's going to affect everything else. If
Yeah.
you are not having meaningful work, and this is, I think, what we hear a lot of the complaint in our profession about, the work is not meaningful, right? Then,
Mhm.
then you're also
Mhm.
not going to be happy. And
Yeah.
sorry, what was your third one?
Work environment, like,
Work
kind of
and
the
question.
culture of where you are.
So
Yeah.
so kind of same thing there, right? I could love
Mhm.
my work, but be at a firm or a company where I don't like my coworkers or it's a very toxic work environment. Unless you have something that's holding you there that is the purpose maybe of where we're really
Mhm.
doing really good work. Nonprofit is a good example of this, where they'll often say, well, I'm willing to take a lower salary. I'm okay kind of working under not the greatest conditions because our work is really meaningful and I'm impacting a constituency that really needs me and what I do. Right.
Mhm.
But it's still, if I can get all three, then I really can feel like I'm doing great things and I'm happy, not just content, but I'm actually happy doing what I do.
Yeah. So then kind of building on that, do you know, what kind of accountants are happiest?
I actually think it's those that find these experiences like I've described. So to
Mhm.
me, it's the ones that are really helping give our clients peace of mind, that we're helping our clients have vision clarity about the future. And in the end, we're giving them that spark of hope. That's going to be the most meaningful work. It's also the highest value work. It's advisory
Mhm.
work. So you get paid the higher dollars. We all know it, right? Advisory and consulting gets paid more than compliance. And
Yeah.
the personality and the culture that's needed to do this type of work is more innovative, it's more thoughtful, it's broader thinking.
Hmm.
And so I think you're going to get all three of those elements if you're really starting to work with others that embrace these types of elements or these three outcomes.
Yeah, yeah, and the word that you said that I'm gonna stick with is meaning or meaningful, and what this study showed was it's accountants who work with nonprofits or in the education sector because they feel like they're actually improving people's lives by doing that, and so this is such a dumb example, but it just rings so true to me. So my dad he's a doctor, okay? And what he did for the first, 20 years of my life was he was a general surgeon and he worked in the ER. So he would do a lot of life-saving procedures, okay? And I akin this a little to compliance work. All right? You're in there cuz you have to be, not cuz you want to be, okay? And what was interesting was after he'd done that for 20 years, he switched his practice and started doing cosmetic surgeries, very specifically varicose vein surgery. So, if people don't know what that is, it's when you have painful, unsightly veins in your legs, you can do different procedures and you can get rid of them. He said his patients were so much more thankful and happy and excited after their procedure. They would just lavish thankfulness on him because they could wear shorts and feel comfortable.
Mhm.
Whereas the people he would save their lives, they were like, oh, thanks, cool. And so that's how I kind of view compliance work versus all this kind of other value added work, both from your perspective as a practitioner and what the client's receiving and the value they're receiving. And what they value is that other work. It's not this thing I did because I had to do it because I didn't want to go to jail. It's this, oh my gosh, you gave me this information that I didn't have before and it's changing my life.
Well, I think it's both, and this is one of the things that I don't like about the way some people talk about advisory work because they're like everyone needs to switch to advisory work, and in my head, I'm like, if everyone switches to advisory work, then we don't have compliance being done. But
Yep.
if you think about advisory work, if you're doing financials or forecasting, if you're forecasting off of bad data, which is where the compliance work is making sure that you have good data, then your advisory is going to be off as well. So I think people need to
Yes.
realize that compliance work has a place. It's going to be automated a lot more. It may not feel as sexy,
It's
but
not.
it
Yeah,
does
it's
need to
not.
be done, and it needs to be done well for us in advisory to
Hmm.
do our part.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. And for people who don't know, like we're recording right now, it's on 413. So you can imagine there is a lot of salty accountants on Twitter right now. And a lot of them are like, I just don't know how much longer I can do this. And it's because a lot of them, it's because they just do that compliance piece. But I am 100% on board with you. Like, you have to have the compliance to do the advisory. And I think this is a good thing in the sense that accountants, especially ones who just run compliance firms, are like, this isn't it. This is not making me happy, but then being able to be like, wait, but I can add on now these advisory services, change my practice and become happier. Like, I have seen more than
Mhm,
one accountant tweet, in the past week that like, all right, it's my monthly clients only I'm keeping as compliance. Or if someone does want me to do their compliance, they have to work with me year round. So I love that people are starting to get fed up with it because ultimately the reality is if you own your own firm and you're unhappy, like that's completely within your power to change,
yeah.
but I think it takes courage to do it because it can be scary. It can be really scary, especially we're numbers people saying no to money.
Mhm, mhm,
That's a really hard thing to do, is to say no to the $2,000 right in front of you. That's a one-time engagement, and being able to say, no, I don't want that. I'm going to instead, you know, be more patient, wait a little longer and get the clients I actually want to get and not tie up all my time into that. So it's like I don't want to gaslight anyone and being like, just do it. It's not scary. It's very scary to do. But it's that saying, if you do what you've always done, you're going to get what you've always gotten,
mhm,
you know?
yeah.
So how do you okay, so here's a question I have. How many employees do you have?
I have 12, essentially 12, um, with me.
Okay. And this is another podcast I did with Dan a couple of weeks ago. I'm not sure what order they'll be airing in, but he talked about how he now regularly has the employees fill out surveys. Do you do something similar to that to kind of, and if you do, what do they say? Or what are your thoughts on that?
So really what he's probably getting towards on that is getting a feel of the pulse. So getting the pulse
Hmm.
of the organization. I actually do that in a couple of different ways. So one of the teams, this is where we experiment with different tools. So one of the teams is using a product that does a pulse check. Every Friday it asks them to give a score from 1 to 5. How are you feeling this week? And then there's a whole bunch of other questions that they actually have to go through, and one of which is, how have you provided peace of mind, vision, and clarity or hope to a client this week? Because I want them to keep that
Oh, wow.
top of mind.
Yeah.
But, it'll ask them, what are some of the things we can change? What did you accomplish this week? It helps them through some goal setting. So we've got something
Hmm.
like that we use. The other thing that I do is all of my direct reports, we have one-on-one meetings every week. And part of that is, how are you doing? And it's not a status report to me. I always tell them these meetings are for you. And so initially, some of them will ask me, like, is it okay if I cancel? And I said, if you don't need my help, then you can cancel. But then don't come to me next week and be like, I ran into all these problems. And I'm like, you canceled our meeting. So that was your fault.
Yeah.
um, but these one-on-ones really help me to understand where they're getting stuck, where are they having challenges, what roadblocks do I need to remove for them, or do I need to help them
Hmm.
overcome a roadblock by additional training or some mentoring. And so through that I get a really good pulse, so I think of what's happening.
Yeah. That just made me think because, like, there's a lot of us out here who are solopreneurs. Do you ever ask those same questions to yourself?
Yes, because actually, so the tool that we use, I fill it. I'm the only one that reads it, but I actually fill it out for
Hmm.
myself because I want to see where I am. And I
Yeah.
think you just alluded toward it, which is, even when you're on your own, do you take that step back and look at it and say,
Hmm.
where is my company? Where is my firm? And what am I doing? And that's something
Yeah.
that we should be doing on a regular basis.
Yeah, and I think it's and I've worked with small business owners, and it's like stuff like that immediately gets pushed to the back burner. It's really hard to prioritize it because you don't necessarily see an ROI immediately on that. Again, I think it's the patience thing, like what can I do that will make me money today, not what will make me money and happiness 369, months from now.
Yeah.
So have you ever read, I love this book so much, The 4 Hour Work Week?
I have not. I read a synopsis of it, but
It's a really easy read if you ever do pick it up. Like, I read the whole thing front to back on a cross country trip, like, within
oh,
4 hours flying coast to coast. But I think everyone should read it, especially solopreneurs, because it really makes you step back and it provides a framework for asking and answering those questions.
great.
And so it's kind of like a way of reverse engineering happiness. And I read it back in December when I was coming home from one of my clients hosts like a CEO coaching event, and it was their year-end event, and it was the theme of the event is like plan for your next year. So it was a very timely like read, like, okay, what do I want to accomplish in the next year? What's going to make me happy? And then, stepping back and then asking those questions like, how much do you want to work? What kind of work do you want to do? How much money do you want to make? And then, like, as you start answering those questions, and then a really interesting question they asked is like, if you needed money to do everything you wanted to do, like, what would that cost per month? And actually breaking down the numbers and looking at it in kind of these silos, and then being able to see the bigger picture around it.
Mhm.
And it was just so interesting of an exercise because it really made me come to terms with like, okay, if I want to get to point B and I'm here at A, like for me personally, a lot of it was these are the things I need to start handing off and outsourcing, even if that means right now that's a revenue drop, or even if that's a big investment of money up front that I'm not going to see returned for 6, 9 months, And so I think, but it's like that, this is something I need to not do yearly. It's something I need to keep asking myself monthly, minimum. Like, where am I at? Where did I want to be at? Like, what changes do I need to make? And
Yeah.
so it's especially harder because it's like no one's going to hold you accountable but yourself.
Yeah.
you
Well,
know?
that what when you as you describe that, it makes me think of the beginning of the career, right? So when you go into college, you've got this endpoint, which is the degree, and what are the classes that you have to take to qualify for that degree? And maybe you layer onto that to sit for the CPA exam or whatever professional exam you happen to decide you want to do. So what do I need to do to do that? So you've got all these requirements that drive you until you get to that point. And then after that, there's nothing that says that. Well, maybe it's the what do I need to do to get promoted? Right. And they
Yeah.
tell you the qualification. Okay, I know I've got what that is. But once you get past that point, and especially if you're a solopreneur or your own partner, then what is it after that? And that's where I think
Mhm.
it's important, like you said, to have that vision for what it is that you want to be 2, 3, 5 years, wherever it is, or where you want to be, and then create that clarity on your path towards that. So that then you
Mhm.
can do your check-ins, whether it's monthly. I actually do mine quarterly to say, okay, did I get everything done that I needed to do? If not, do I need to readjust? And then
Mhm.
am I on track, or has this thing shifted? Do I need to change my direction because I that's not what I want anymore?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like these are conversations because I do a fair amount of forecasting work. And it's like these are, as we're especially building out the model initially, it's a lot of, we're not talking about numbers. We're talking about like, what do you want your life to look like? What's your end game? Like, because obviously, someone who wants to just, create kind of passive revenue, work 20 hours a week, yada, 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 that financial forecast is going to look very different than someone who's like, I want to scale up and sell in 5 years,
Yeah.
and, and so, it's like if I'm having these conversations with people who are paying me, I'm like, why am I not having these with myself? Because these are very important questions.
Yeah.
They're the most important questions, I think, because everything derives from those answers. So,
Well, and coming
yeah,
coming back to what you said about the happiness, I think that is, what our whole topic, the whole satisfaction, really is to figure out. I might be unsatisfied in the now, but what does it take? And maybe that can help create some of that patience, because if you work through this, whatever it is, even though it sucks
hmm
now, it's going to help get you to where you want to be. Because you said it earlier, like if you hadn't had the exposure that you had in the firm to the different things, I always just say the same thing. That was a lot of work in those years. But if I
yeah,
didn't have that,
hmm
I wouldn't be doing what I was doing now.
hmm Yeah, no, I agree. There's definitely like, especially when you're just starting out, it's that those first 3 years, I think, like those are such huge learning years. And it's like, it's not always fun. It's can be grunt work, but it's like, well, okay, it might not be the best work, but how can we make sure that these other factors, it's meaningful work? If we can make it meaningful, you're getting paid well for it. It's a positive, supportive environment. Those are things that we can control even if we can't control necessarily that it's the best work. Like I just think of it. So my first job that I took was at a very toxic firm. Like I cannot overemphasize how horrible this was. Like I was being paid, mind you, $35,000 a year. Okay. Like, and then they pull us in to, all to the conference room. It wasn't a big firm. It was maybe about 11 people. And they tell us, if you don't hit your realization hours or rates or whatever, we're going to drop your salary. And then every week they were posting in the break room how many hours everyone was working, and so it was very toxic environment. And then after 10 months, I left and I was doing the exact same work in a firm that had a, very supportive environment, was getting paid better immediately, had an amazing boss who eventually became a business partner, but who was just always willing to help, always willing to teach. And it was such a difference, And so it's like the work was the same. It was the exact same work. I was doing tax returns, but it was just everything else was so much better. So I think that is something to keep in mind, both as a solopreneur and for employers. Like the work is sometimes just might suck, but what can we make? Can we make everything else not suck? So on this kind of note about employee happiness, I came across one of my friends on Twitter, Brandon Hall, just retweeted this today. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have to talk about this on the podcast. So this was put out by EY News. So Ernest Young, it's one of and they're verified. So they must have a pretty decent following on here. But this is this is the tweet. They said, how can you turn resignation into retention? And this is what they said you don't do. Pay perks and promotions. Like, they said, don't do that. And then what they said you do is empathetic leadership. And I'm like, and they said an EU study of over 1,000 US workers found a direct correlation between retention and workplace empathy. And it's just like, I feel like there was the bullseye and they completely missed it, because I think like kind of what we've been talking about is it's just not really one thing. It's everything. So it's like you can't just say, hey, we have empathetic leaders, but we're going to pay you $36,000 a year. Like, do
Well,
you have any thoughts on that tweet or?
so part of it is that I like to give people the benefit of the doubt. And
Mhm,
so what they're probably emphasizing is the fact that it's not just about pay, which I completely agree with. Like people that come and work for our
mhm,
firm, on average, take about a 20% pay cut, but we
mhm.
give them like zero overtime. Everyone here works whatever hours they choose, and whether it's the 30-hour week or the 40. Now their salary is adjusted accordingly, but most of them are coming from a situation where they're working a lot of overtime. And so the salary is now a non-overtime salary. And so they end up taking that pay cut.
Yeah.
So I think the point that they're trying to do is that it's not just about pay, and it's not about all of this Silicon Valley perks of the pool
The
table and
Patagonia
whatever, right?
zippy.
That's not what's going to
Yeah.
keep people. It's about the leadership and really caring, which I think it is. That creates the culture aspect that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And as you said, even if the work is not the most meaningful work, having being in
Mhm.
that supportive environment, having a reasonable pay that
Yeah.
might be enough to actually get you through because you love you love who you're working with, and you're able to sustain and do what you want to do.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely. Awesome. Well, I think this has been an amazing conversation, and I really hope our listeners have been able to, have some good takeaways. Because I think whether you are an employee, an employer, or a solopreneur, I think there are keys within this episode that apply to all of us. Like literally I'm thinking right now like the first thing I'm going to do once I get off this is like go and kind of assess, okay, where am I at? Where am I need to be? Even though I should be doing tax returns. Yeah. No one's going to die if the return doesn't get done is what I
Well,
always
you can
say.
still extend, so you're not
So,
too bad.
exactly. And so actually on that note, cuz like I said we're like right in the thick of it, is what is one tax law you would change? If you could change it today, executive power, what would you do?
Oh, I would that one I would be the mobile workforce and getting something about enforced about the mobile workforce. Because for me, I travel state to state, speak at different things.
Mhm.
And so the tax return can be a real pain because certain states,
Yeah.
once you step foot in them, all of a sudden you have this tax liability for them, right? So
Yeah.
that's what. Unfortunately, it's a little self-serving on my part, but I think with everything going on with remote work, it's actually going to end up
Yeah.
impacting a lot more of us than we originally anticipated.
Oh my gosh, yeah. No, that's 100%. So IRS, please. Mine would actually be I think I responded to this on someone's tweet, but I was like, why don't we do this? Because a lot of preparers were talking about how much time they waste filing extensions. They're like, I could be preparing tax returns, and here I am spending this whole week, before the deadline, just preparing or making sure extensions get filed. So I was like, well, what if we just kept the payment date as 4/15, but we just made the filing date as 10/15 with
Mm.
no extensions. That's the one thing I would change. Would it confuse taxpayers? Yes. But oh well, they're confused anyway. So I'm like, I really don't care if the taxpayers are confused. I care more about people within our industry and being able to get the work done. So that's my one little change I would do. So, Donnie, if people want to connect with you, how should they do that?
I would say the best is just to find me on LinkedIn. And it's Donny Shimamoto. Just under that, the last name is it's spelled exactly as it sounds. Or I'm Donny ITK, India Tango Kilo, Donny ITK on pretty much all the different social media as well.
Nice, nice. And if anyone wants to find me, the best place is going to be on Twitter at Lorilyn Wilson. I'm on there tweeting, causing a ruckus, so it's always a fun time on text Twitter. But Donnie, thank you so much for coming on the show today. And your perspective was it was really fresh and enlightening and thoughtful. I really loved like everything you said, and I can tell that it comes from a place of a lot of experience. Like it's just you're not just giving lip service. Like you really have lived it and learned it, and it was just awesome to listen to everything you had to say. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This was definitely fun.
Yes, and I'm your new hype girl. So if you're ever feeling down, you know what? I will I will hype you up immediately. So
Awesome.
awesome. Well, thank you so much, Donnie.